In 1867, a world power sold a territory larger than many countries for just $7.2 million. At the time, the decision seemed almost ordinary. There were no massive celebrations, no crowds gathering in the streets, and no sense that history had just changed direction. In fact, many people reacted with laughter. Newspapers mocked the agreement, political opponents ridiculed the politicians involved, and countless Americans questioned why their government had spent millions of dollars on what appeared to be nothing more than a frozen wilderness at the edge of the known world. To most observers, Alaska was a distant and inhospitable land, covered by snow, ice, mountains, and forests. It had no major cities, little infrastructure, and almost no visible signs of wealth. Yet hidden beneath that frozen landscape were some of the most valuable natural resources on Earth, including vast reserves of oil, natural gas, gold, copper, zinc, silver, and countless other minerals that would eventually generate hundreds of billions of dollars. Even more importantly, Alaska occupied one of the most strategic locations on the planet, sitting at the gateway between North America and Asia. More than a century later, historians still debate whether Russia made one of the worst deals in history, or whether it simply sold a territory that it could never realistically defend. Whatever the answer may be, few diplomatic agreements have had consequences as enormous as the day Russia sold Alaska to the United States. To understand why such an extraordinary transaction took place, it is necessary to step back into the world of the 19th century. Today, Alaska is viewed as one of the most resource-rich regions in the world, but in the 1860s, it looked very different. The territory belonged to the Russian Empire, yet it remained largely unexplored and poorly understood. The region stretched across approximately 586,000 square miles, an area so vast that it exceeded the combined size of several major European countries. Despite its immense size, however, it generated relatively little income. Russian settlements were small and isolated, transportation was difficult, and communication with the imperial capital required long and expensive journeys across oceans and continents. Most economic activity revolved around the fur trade, particularly the hunting of sea otters, whose pelts commanded high prices in international markets. For a time, this trade had been profitable, but by the middle of the 19th century, the industry was in decline. Animal populations had decreased, profits were shrinking, and the costs of maintaining such a distant colony were becoming increasingly difficult to justify. The situation changed dramatically after the Crimean War, a conflict that exposed major weaknesses within the Russian Empire. Between 1853 and 1856, Russia fought against a coalition that included Britain and France, and the war left the empire financially strained and politically vulnerable. Russian leaders emerged from the conflict with a growing sense of concern about the future of Alaska. The territory sat dangerously close to British North America, which would later become Canada, and British naval power dominated the world's oceans. If another war erupted between Britain and Russia, many officials feared that Alaska could be captured with relative ease. The territory was simply too far away. Reinforcements would take months to arrive, supply lines would be vulnerable, and defending such a remote possession would be extraordinarily difficult. Within the halls of government, a difficult question began to take shape. Why continue spending money to protect a territory that might eventually be lost without compensation? If Alaska could not be effectively defended, perhaps it would be wiser to sell it while it still possessed some value. This idea eventually reached Emperor Alexander II, who understood that the empire faced serious challenges requiring immediate attention. Selling Alaska offered several advantages. It would provide much-needed revenue, eliminate the burden of defending a remote colony, and strengthen diplomatic relations with the United States. Across the Atlantic, there was already a powerful supporter of expansion waiting for such an opportunity. His name was William H. Seward, the American Secretary of State. Seward firmly believed that the future of the United States depended on expanding its influence across the Pacific Ocean. He viewed Alaska not as a frozen wasteland, but as a strategic investment in America's future. When Russian diplomats quietly suggested the possibility of a sale, Seward immediately recognized an opportunity that many of his contemporaries failed to see. The negotiations moved surprisingly quickly. Then, during the evening of March 29, 1867, representatives from both nations gathered in Washington to finalize the agreement. As discussions continued into the night, a sense of urgency developed. Finally, during the early hours of March 30th, at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, the treaty was signed. In a matter of moments, ownership of one of the largest territorial regions on Earth changed hands. The United States acquired approximately 1.5 million square kilometers of land for just $7.2 million, a price that amounted to roughly 2 cents per acre. Even today, the figure sounds astonishing. Yet the reaction from the public was not admiration, but ridicule. Newspapers immediately attacked the deal, publishing cartoons and editorials mocking the purchase. Critics nicknamed it Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox, suggesting that the government had wasted millions of dollars on a useless wilderness populated by glaciers and polar bears. To many Americans, the purchase seemed irrational. Why spend millions on a territory that appeared to offer nothing of value? Why buy land that looked incapable of generating wealth? For years, it seemed entirely possible that the critics were correct. What nobody realized was that Alaska was hiding treasures on a scale almost impossible to imagine. As exploration increased during the late 19th century, prospectors began discovering gold deposits throughout the region. News of these discoveries spread rapidly, triggering gold rushes that attracted thousands of fortune seekers from across North America. Entire communities emerged almost overnight as people flooded into the territory, hoping to strike it rich. Yet even gold would eventually be overshadowed by discoveries made during the 20th century. Beneath Alaska's frozen ground lay enormous reserves of oil and natural gas. The discovery of Prudhoe Bay in 1968 revealed one of the largest oil fields ever found in North America, containing billions of barrels of recoverable petroleum. Additional surveys uncovered vast deposits of copper, zinc, lead, silver, coal, and rare earth minerals that would later become essential for modern industries. The surrounding waters proved equally valuable, supporting one of the richest fishing industries on Earth. Every year, billions of dollars worth of seafood are harvested from Alaskan waters, contributing to an economy that 19th century politicians could never have imagined. The territory once dismissed as worthless had become one of the most resource-rich regions on the planet. Yet perhaps the most extraordinary consequence of the purchase was not economic, but geopolitical. At the narrowest point of the Bering Strait, Alaska and Russia are separated by less than 60 miles. During the 20th century, this seemingly insignificant geographic detail became critically important. Following the Russian Revolution and the rise of the Soviet Union, Alaska found itself facing America's greatest rival across a narrow stretch of water. During the Cold War, military planners recognized the territory's strategic value immediately. Radar stations were constructed across the region, air bases expanded rapidly, and early warning systems monitored Soviet activity. Alaska became a key component of North America's defense network. Looking back, it is difficult not to wonder how differently history might have unfolded had Russia never sold the territory. A Soviet Alaska would have fundamentally altered the balance of power during the Cold War. Military installations, missile systems, and strategic bombers might have operated from positions deep within North America. The political and military consequences would have been enormous. Although nobody can know exactly what would have happened, the possibility remains one of history's most fascinating, unanswered questions. And perhaps that is what makes the sale of Alaska so remarkable. The men who signed the agreement believed they were solving a practical problem of their own time. They could not see the gold rushes that would follow. They could not see the oil fields hidden beneath the tundra. They could not see the military importance Alaska would acquire during the Cold War. They could not see the billions of dollars waiting beneath the ice, yet their decision would shape the future of two great powers and influence world history for generations. More than 150 years later, the sale of Alaska remains one of the most extraordinary transactions ever completed. A reminder that the true value of something is not always visible at the moment it changes hands.